And we are live for a special Week 8 edition of the Sunday War Room. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, with a very shortened edition of the War Room starting at, what is this, 11 o'clock. It's actually our normal
Yeah.
starting time, but we're doing halftime show here, so we only have about 12 minutes, roughly, give or take, to get through as many start-sit questions as possible. I'm surrounded, of course, by greatness again this week with Mike Clay and Pat Thorman. Guys, we're going to skip the pleasantries this morning since we're on such a short time span, and let's get right into some of the action. Pat, we were talking a little bit before the show about perhaps a big inactive this week, so why don't you lead off with that?
Well, you're talking about Trent Richardson, and yeah, I mean, Bradshaw is a great play. I mean, he's already been a great play, and Heron might actually kind of sneak in there and get some value as well. They're running a ton of plays and piling up a lot. So yeah, I mean, bump Bradshaw up. He's borderline RB1 in my opinion, definite RB2.
All right, and that's important to make sure you get that situated there in your lineups if you are a Richardson owner, Bradshaw owner. And Eric is with us hanging out, and so we'll get right into Eric's question here. Mike, in a non-PPR, you're picking one between Giovanni Bernard, Justin Forsett, or Michael Floyd, and so what are you going to do if you're in that situation?
Well, I do like Floyd this week going up against that Eagles secondary. We know that certainly Kerry Williams has struggled a lot on the outside, and Bradley Fletcher more of a mediocre cornerback option. So he does have a plus matchup. That being said, in standard leagues, usually if it's close, you're going to go with the edge towards the running back. Usually those top guys are going to score more points. So in this case, I'm going with Gio Bernard. Not doing a ton of damage between the tackles this year, more of an asset as a pass catcher, but still a fantastic athlete there. So I like him up against Baltimore today.
Thoughts on that, Pat?
Yeah, I completely agree. Same reason Mike said. I mean, I do love Floyd today, even more than normal. But yeah, Gio is the clear play on this one.
I'm going to agree with you on that one. And, this morning, obviously, a barrage of tweets, probably earlier than we're used to, thanks to this darn London game. But, Mike, anything you've seen commonly coming up? I know there are a couple players I've seen on my feed that I've been getting a lot of questions about. Any particular players you've seen so far this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of overreactions here to some trade rumors that are popping up. Ian Rappaport today mentioned Vincent Jackson, and then I think he was the one also who mentioned Doug Martin. Unlike in some other sports, you're not going to see like Vincent Jackson get, just benched for the game today because he's about to get traded, anything like that. He's going to play his full complement of snaps, and he's a very good player. Very busy in that offense, very good chance to score a touchdown. So start him as you normally would. He's, I'd say, a borderline wide receiver one at worst. And Doug Martin, obviously he's not performing particularly well this year. They say Bobby Rainey after the bye probably going to be more involved. So Martin, not an ideal start, but don't overreact to any of these trade rumors. If he does get traded, it won't be until next week. Really won't have any impact on today's game.
Yeah, and certainly an interesting player who sees a lot of targets in that offense is Vincent Jackson. So a player I actually really like this week as a nice start. If you own him, obviously, don't think elsewhere. I do get some of these questions where a lot of times it's really overthinking the issue. I got one this week. Vincent Jackson or Devontae Adams. That's just overthinking it. Yes, it's going to be a high-scoring game tonight, no doubt about it. But you're not going away from Vincent Jackson in that, it's just, silly. Don't overthink those sorts of things. And so if you're actually managing to hang out with us today, we appreciate it. It is a condensed edition. Eddie's with us in the chat room, and Eddie has a start-sit question here. LaShawn McCoy going up against a Cardinals defense that actually is relatively strong against the run. Jerick McKinnon against the Tampa defense that isn't strong against the run, but coming off the bye. And then Shane Vereen, obviously a big performance last week, but a lot of folks just don't trust Bill Belichick. Looks like I don't have information on that, whether or not looks like it is a PPR. So, Mike, McCoy, McKinnon, or Vereen, who are you going with if you can only pick one out of that bunch?
Well, that's tough. I think I would probably sit McCoy here. I might be more likely to go with him if Darren Sproles is out, because that probably adds another maybe 2, 3 targets there for McCoy and probably pushes him over the top. But if he's not getting the high volume with the targets and he's doing it all as a runner, he's gonna have a hard time with this Arizona defense. So I definitely think in that situation it's a down week, and I'd stay away. That leaves McKinnon and Vereen. I think McKinnon. It's very close here. I love his matchup, and actually I think that's the direction I go. But risks with both of these guys, especially if New England's able to get ahead on Chicago, you'll see a lot of Jonas Gray. We saw that with Ridley earlier this year, where if they were ahead, Ridley would play a lot, rack up a lot of carries, goal line work, and Vereen would be left on the sideline. So I like Vereen a lot. Still, I think he'll play enough, but I think that gives McKinnon the edge up against Tampa Bay. I think he's in for a breakout game. I think he, could be one of them guys that scores twice, goes over 120 total yards. I really like him this week.
Pat, what do you think about that one?
It's definitely a tough one. I love all three of those options, especially in PPR. Vereen obviously gets a huge boost in that format. I still would keep McCoy in there. I mean, he looked a lot better. Back against the Giants in Week 6. The offensive line starting to come around. I know Arizona's got a super tough run defense, but that game is going to be high flying. I mean, he's going to get plenty of opportunities to make plays. Reading the rest of his question, Eddie's question, he asked if you would bench any of those guys for Ertz to get him in the flex because he already has Reed, and I would not do that. I would certainly stick with the running backs over Ertz. Like I said, all three of those guys are great options.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And I actually probably would side with you. I don't know. I have these guys like back-to-back in my rankings, McKinnon and McCoy here this week, and it is a really tough one because Mike makes a fantastic point. This is just a monster upside game. But the way that McCoy showed right before the bye gives me some hope. I'm a bit of an Eagles homer, so I might lean slightly towards McCoy, but it's almost a coin flip for me between these two guys. Now, tossing it back over to Twitter, I had some questions about Jimmy Graham this morning. Obviously last week was a bit of a disappointment. Mike, what are you expecting to see out of Jimmy Graham this evening?
It's hard to expect anything other than what we saw last week. I mean, he was on the field quite a bit. He ran a lot of pass routes, but you just don't really know what to expect. I'm treating him kind of as a back-end tight end one. If you have somebody you think you could count on, go for it. If not, then you might as well go with Graham and go with the high ceiling there. If you don't have anybody exciting to slot in there. So if you're looking at you're desperate on a bye week, looking at like Crockett Gilmore, Heath Miller, Scott Chandler, maybe just stay away and go with Jimmy Graham. But if you do have another option like a Delaney Walker, or maybe you grab Jordan Reed, or when he was out with the injuries, Antonio Gates, a guy like that, get them in your. Oh, excuse me, Gates already played, of course, but your Jordan Camerons, those kind of guys are strong options, I think. But again, if you're looking at a tight end too, not much upside, just go with Graham.
Yeah, and another situation too, and I do agree with you there. Obviously, we saw it last year what Graham can give us, and I want to get both of your thoughts on this situation though that I've seen, and we're actually getting some questions on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, a couple minutes here to get some questions in. Hashtag it War Room, and we'll try our best to get to them. But the question deals with the Buffalo running back situation. In fact, two of them that I have on the feed right now. Bryce Brown, obviously, a player they acquired in the offseason from the Philadelphia Eagles we were just talking about. And then Anthony Dixon, who's kind of a Matt Asiata plus. He's sort of a glorified fullback, but he runs hard when he's in the game. So, this is a tough one. It's a big conundrum. We don't really know exactly which direction the Bills are going to go in. And I want to get both of your thoughts. Pat, I'll toss it over to you first. I mean, if you had to pick one of these guys, are you picking one of them first and foremost, and then which one would it be?
If I had another reasonable option, I would probably go in that direction, especially until this shakes out a little more clearly, and they're not playing a real strong run defense like the Jets. I think Dixon profiles as a kind of more of a between the tackles guy, which is where the Jets are stronger. So in this case, to choose between one of those two, I would probably go with Brown. They obviously like him quite a bit. They gave up a relatively premium pick. I think it was a fourth rounder. And he's more of an outside presence and a pass catcher. So I think that works against the Jets linebackers. Running up the gut against the Jets three-man line is kind of a fool's errand. So forced to choose, I'd take Brown. If I could, I would avoid the situation.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah. Are you asking about this week or going forward? I missed
I
that
think a
part.
little bit of both. I mean, if you had, what do you
Okay.
see this week? What do you expect going forward? Assuming Fred Jackson's on the tail end of that timetable.
I think Dixon is gonna kind of slot into Fred Jackson's role short term here while Jackson's out, and Bryce Brown more into C.J. Spiller's role. So I actually kind of like Dixon a little bit more here, just especially because it's unknown with Bryce Brown. Hey, he can come out and just barely play. They may just go Dixon almost every down. It's a possibility that we just don't know. I think the better odds is that we see Bryce Brown in that 10 to 12 carry range and Dixon handling passing downs, pass blocking, that kind of stuff, which will give him targets. So, but down the road, Bryce Brown's the guy I prioritize on waivers, and the reason is I think when Fred Jackson comes back and, he'll probably see a slight uptick in carries from the first half of the season, but he'll also remain heavily involved in the passing game. He was among the running back leaders in targets before he went down, and whereas then Bryce Brown, the more talented of the runner between he and Dixon, will pick up, Spiller's share of the carries, which he was ahead of Jackson in carries most weeks. So that's kind of my outlook there. I would prefer Bryce Brown.
And I almost have to figure why would they give up that if they didn't envision something for Brown long-term, Spiller contract situation coming up. So that does make a lot of sense. One other running back situation here as we're getting close. If not, I'm on a 30-second delay on my little iPad here, but getting close to this game starting back up. The running back situation I want to pay attention to quickly, give some advice out there, is in New Orleans. Obviously, this week without Pierre Thomas, Kyrie Robinson, we're going to see Mark Ingram, who hasn't actually had a lot of snaps, but gets a decent amount of touches in those snaps. And then Travaris Cadet playing today. And Mike, I know basically, you project touches, you project targets, so you have your finger on the pulse of this situation. So why not, just give everybody what you expect to see out of the running backs from New Orleans this evening?
I think Mark Ingram definitely gets a big boost here. You're going to be looking at a guy here who's probably going to see 15 or so carries, and he actually was seeing some targets earlier in the year too. So you can expect 2 to 4 of those. And I think Ingram in standard is a borderline running back one, and probably just slight downgrade in PPR. Of course, it's easy to like Travaris Cadet. We've seen these pass catchers heavily involved in the passing game with Drew Brees for a long time and Sean Payton, of course. So Cadet probably is a borderline running back too in PPR, and probably more of a flex option if you're desperate in standard leagues. He's probably looking at being among the league leaders in running back catches this week, probably around 4 to 6 of those. So and hey, how about a little deeper there in the depth chart? We're probably looking at Edwin Baker, called up from the practice squad, seeing just a handful of carries. It is worth noting though, Tom Crabtree was waived, which suggests that the Saints may actually be ready to use Jimmy Graham more often. That's usually a good sign when they don't need that stopgap there. And the Colts, meanwhile, did not add a running back, which means that if Richardson's out, they're only going with 2 tailbacks, and that could be a sign that maybe Richardson will be a surprise active here in 15 minutes. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Keeping an eye on this game. It is starting back up. And as Pat so eloquently put before the show, you don't want to look at our ugly mugs while this game is on, so we are going to wrap things up. Pat, any closing thoughts? I got one question we should answer really quickly here, a question we've been dealing with over the last couple weeks. A deep tight end play. If you have Charles Clay, you might want to look somewhere else, as our tweeter mentioned. So are you looking anywhere else? Is there a deep tight end play this week you might make, and then we'll wrap things up from there?
Well, a deep tight end play. Jason Morrow against the Bills, who struggle against tight ends. I think they're going to have to throw. Both teams are going to have to throw a lot. They both have good run defenses. So I like him. He's getting more work lately. And real quick on those New Orleans running backs, Ingram in FanDuel and Cadet in DraftKings, where it's full PPR and he's cheap. So good luck today, guys.
Bottom line, $3,000. Gotta love it. Sorry for the abridged show. It's only 15 minutes this week, but we will be back for a full show next week in Week 9. Enjoy the rest of this game. Hopefully Detroit gets back in it. Best of luck to you this week. So for Pro Football Focus Fantasy, for Mike Clay, for Pat Thorman, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe, and that's a wrap, folks.